You're listening to If Only I Were Wiser podcast, where Raina Wilson brings together wisdom and raw life stories to provide encouragement and truth. So many times it's easy to become discouraged in your own pursuit of health because your story or circumstances look drastically different from your favorite influencer or even the expectations you had for yourself. If that is you, welcome! This space is for you to learn, breathe, and maybe just listen and see what wellness could look like for you. Hey friends, welcome back to the If Only I Were Wiser podcast. On today's episode, I have a super fun, sweet friend, Beth Dreyer. Beth is known for her super cool, fun, and bright outfits, and so in this episode, we chat all about how to dress for joy, choosing joy in the really low circumstances of life, especially as a believer, and how to keep moving forward while being authentic to yourself, to others, and choosing joy when life just kind of sucks. So let's go ahead and dive in. Hey Beth, welcome to the If Only I Were Wiser podcast.
Thank you.
Like I just told you, I'm so excited for this conversation because your platform has just been such a bright light, which I know is your heart for your space.
Thank you.
But before we get into all the joyful details and just what life looks like for you right now, I know it's been a little bit all over the place, but I want to hear about your family and a little bit about you.
Okay. So I have been married for 17 years and I have 4 kids. My oldest just turned 16.
Wow.
It's crazy. He's huge. Like people think he's older than he is. It's funny. It's amazing. Anyway, so we homeschool. So my days right now, and I also have a job.
Okay.
So I work in the evenings for a production company and we do live events.
Whoa.
And yeah, so I am basically my role, it's kind of a conference type situation. And so there's different producers who are running all these different things. You know, there's multiple things going on simultaneously during the day. And at night, usually the groups will have like some kind of fun party or reception. So at night, I take over everybody's groups so that the main producers can go home. So I go in to work at 3:00. So I homeschool in the morning and then, usually around until about lunchtime. And then I, have lunch, get ready, go to work. And I'm at work usually until about 10:00 and then come back in. So I work 4 days a week. So our days are full. But it's been good.
Yeah. So what did it look like for you to get started in your Instagram online presence?
So, well, I mean, I just had an Instagram, right? Like everybody does.
Mm-hmm.
And then eventually I kind of started trying to grow it. And my platform isn't that big, but for a while I talked about health and wellness. It was my main, topic. And then I kind of transitioned over into joy, and now joy is my main topic. So we can talk a little bit more about how I got there in a minute, but yeah.
Yeah. So let's dive in right there.
Okay.
Why? Was it the Lord? Was it, what was it in your story that brought you from what you're doing previously to no, like I need to share about joy and what that means for me, my family, and other people?
Well, I think when you're in the wellness space, I think I was naturally bringing those two things together, right? Like, joy is a part of wellness. And so I kind of, when I look back now at some of my older posts, I can see where I was talking a lot about joy. But then what really happened was that, I can't remember what year, like 2018, 2019, somewhere in there, I, in February that winter, had gotten sick and it just kind of took me down. And I mean, like the flu or a cold, nothing like major, but it just, the winter, I got into some seasonal depression and I didn't really realize it until kind of afterwards. And then I looked back and was talking to my husband and I was like, I was kind of depressed there, wasn't I? And he was like, yeah, you were. And, which is not that I don't tend toward depression. I'm an Enneagram 7. I've always been a very happy kind of person. But looking back after that, I could kind of see, oh gosh, there were really all of these like domino pieces that like led to this moment. We're also a really healthy family in the wellness, space. So we do all the things, but there were several years, again, looking back, you kind of see where we would make it all the way through fall and early winter, not getting sick. Everybody else would be getting sick. We would not get sick at all. And then I would kind of like feel like I was home free and kind of like let up on doing all the things. And then in February, we would get sick. So
Yeah.
that had happened. So, but I looked back and I realized, okay, this really actually started for me. Things started going downhill for me like around Thanksgiving when I did not have boundaries or with
Mm.
family and planning holiday things. And I started getting tired. And then, Christmas and then, like all these things. And then I realized, oh, I really stopped walking because it was cold, and I didn't want to get
Yeah.
out of the house. I live in Texas, but
Yeah.
we're wimps. Um, and different things like that. And I started realizing like, oh, I kind of really set myself up to be susceptible to this without even realizing it. I was exhausted. I wasn't really taking care of myself very well. I wasn't making choices that were going to protect my joy or my energy. And so that coming fall, so later that year, like in September or something, I was like, I'm going to make myself a little joy checklist, seasonal joy checklist, so that I can like identify, I've kind of like identified all these things that went wrong. And I think I even asked people on Instagram, like, I think I'm going to do this. What are your thoughts? Like, what are some things that kind of put us into seasonal depression, and kind of like gathered some things and made this little seasonal joy checklist really for myself. But I shared it,
Yeah.
and it resonated. I mean, it's not like and everything took off and my whole life changed, not at all. But
Yeah.
like it just kind of struck me that, oh, this is what I need to keep talking about. So like slowly I started talking more and more about joy. And then I decided the following, spring or something, to make just a joy checklist. So I
Mm.
had a seasonal joy checklist, and then I just a regular life joy checklist. And
Yeah.
then, as things have moved along, I've talked a lot about that. And there have been seasons where I've been able to be more intensely focused on Instagram presence and like really talking about things. And then, I started this job almost a year ago, and I've been very full since then. So I haven't been able, I really
Yeah.
want to create a joy e-course. That's on my list. It's been on my list
Oh,
for like over a year. But things take time. So
life.
waiting for the right time. And so that'll come. But yeah, so that's kind of like how I transitioned into talking about joy. And it really makes sense. So then I really got into like little ways to sprinkle joy throughout your life. And I got really into somewhere in there. I had read, Marie Kondo's book, and you go through all your things and what things don't spark joy. And I realized that like most of the clothes that I had I didn't love them at all. And I had,
Yeah.
I was in that place where I had had my last child. So you have all these clothes that are like all different sizes, and all like they need to work for breastfeeding, and like you buy things because they work and they fit a need rather than
Hmm.
because you actually enjoy them. So
Oof. Yeah.
yeah, so I started building back my wardrobe about, I don't know, 4 or 5 years ago, and started really building my wardrobe to be for joy. And so now I'm kind of also known for dressing for joy. So at work, I wear, very brightly colored things, and I take bathroom selfies. But I am telling you, people love my clothes. And like people tell me all the time,
Hmm.
people who have no idea who I am or what I do on the side on Instagram will come up to me and be like, your outfits always bring me so much joy. And I'm like, thank you. I'm so glad. That's the point. And
Yeah.
I dress for my own joy. And when you do that, you're unconsciously spreading joy to others and spreading permission
Mm.
to look for joy, I think, to others.
Yes, I love that. I'm definitely one of those people that whenever I see your bathroom selfies, I'm like, oh, Beth, you're so cute today.
Thank you.
Um, which I think with outfits, especially in motherhood, and we can kind of transition how to find joy in motherhood through the different
Hmm.
seasons because I'm in the littles stage,
Yeah.
my son
Yeah.
is almost 2.5 and we're still breastfeeding. So I'm like navigating, do I need to
Hmm.
whip? I don't necessarily need to whip the boob out in every outfit
Uh-huh.
now. So it's like
Yeah.
that weird, like, okay, I can put on a dress and feel somewhat beautiful, but then it's also
Yes.
navigating my own body, lies, whatever.
Right.
So I definitely think outfits. That's a great place to start. So
Mhm.
where else can we start to make these subtle shifts towards implementing joy in an intentional way into our
Mhm.
daily habits?
So I think, like, literally just what you said is just start being intentional about adding joy to your life. So I think of it as sprinkling joy throughout your life, throughout your day. Sometimes it's just solving a problem that is constantly giving you irritation. So I'll give you an
Mm,
example in my own life. I don't love this, but I need to listen to something to fall asleep. So I have my phone on airplane mode and I'm usually listening to an audiobook that I've already listened to fall asleep. And I set the sleep timer. So I have to have headphones. Um, and so, but then I was needing to have headphones at work too, sometimes to be on calls in my office because we were in a shared office. So I was trying to bring my headphones, in my backpack to work and then remember to bring them up to bed. So I'd like be in bed and I have to go downstairs and pull them out of my backpack. Okay.
mhm.
For $16, I bought a second pair of headphones. Okay.
Yeah.
And that made such a difference. And so now I always know where my headphones are in my drawer upstairs and then they're always in my backpack. And so that kind of thing can really help. Like I like really pausing and identifying the sources of strife or things that are bringing you down that are causing stress that can be solved because some things can't be
Mhm.
solved, right?
Right.
But usually there are things in our life that are stressors that can be solved. So finding those, and especially if they're like a $16 fix, I mean, my gosh, like
Yeah.
bless yourself, right? Um so that kind of thing. But then also I like to talk about s- having treats to look forward to. Obviously, we're both in the wellness world, so I'm not talking about like binging on ice cream at the end of the
Sure.
day. But having, for me, for years, it was kombucha. I used to, for like, 12 years probably, I made kombucha. And again, started a job, have not kept that up. But now I drink poppy. Do you know poppies?
I'm here for it.
Oh
Olipop, poppies. Yeah.
I love them so much. Yes. I love them so, so, so much. Um, but if budget is a concern,
Yeah.
making kombucha is so cheap. Um, so if you have time but not money, you can make something. I also love cookies. And I'm just not
Yeah.
gonna apologize for that. And so I have a whole thing where I love my snack is cookies. So I have a recipe that I promise you is anointed by God. Every time I share these cookies, people are like, "Oh my gosh."
Mm.
And they're gluten free.
Yep. I need that.
So I can share that recipe with you if you like. I will send you the link. But so yeah, I make cookies for myself and I don't share them with my kids and I don't apologize for that. They some of them are old enough to
Mhm.
make their own cookies now. I would in the past like make separate cookies for them. Everybody knows it's like a huge deal if I'm sharing my cookies with you. So I share with friends. I will sometimes bring cookies to work. But so I try to make sure that I have cookies. And then further, I try to bless myself in advance by making, I'll make a batch of cookie dough and
Mhm.
only bake half of it. Put the rest like in a roll in the freezer so that I can slice and bake like as needed for cookie
I love that.
emergencies because life has cookie emergencies. I'm just
Oh, for
saying, you got
sure.
to be prepared. So I think of that as like my cookie emergency fund. So and it's different for everybody, right? You got to figure out what the things are for you, but knowing that there is a lot of science behind anticipation. So if you know that you have something to look forward to, whether it's as small as a yummy drink like a kombucha or a poppy or an olipop, or knowing that you have cookies hidden in your bedside table, or bigger things like checking concert schedules and seeing that someone that you want to see is coming to town and getting the tickets, or booking vacations. I know a lot of people talk, I haven't gotten to this yet, but a lot of people talk about when you are on the vacation, you need to be
Hmm.
booking the next vacation so that you know that something is coming up, so that when you go back to work and you're working hard and you're in the grind of motherhood and you're
Yeah.
changing diapers and you're in the thick, that you know that that's coming, whether it's like a year from now or whatever. Again, I don't do that and I want to, and I think it's brilliant. Um, but I think those kinds of things, you can set yourself up for success. But it just depends on what is going to set you up for success. Like, what are things that you can treat yourself with, that are not going to adversely affect your health or your mental health, right? Because we know that scrolling the phone for hours isn't necessarily the best. We all do it. Sometimes it's great. But, having other things that are going to be good, or, like setting aside time, and again, it depends on the season of life you're in, to
Hmm.
read before you go to bed, whatever it is. But having things that are going to bring you just a small little hit of delight or joy, those things, the intentionality of that kind of stuff makes a huge difference, I think.
Oh, for sure. And I think I heard it first with Hunter Belis. She shares her closing question on the Journey Women podcast is like, what's your simple joy? So that's something like we've adopted in our
Ooh,
family. It's like,
nice.
what's a simple joy for today? And sometimes like
Yeah.
I'm a beverage girly. So I can
Same.
I can do all the things. We walk by the kombucha or like juice section of a store, I'm getting a juice. Like even my husband knows that. But I've started like sharing that also on social media and just being like, hey, like this is my simple joy for today. And I've even caught it
Ooh, I like that.
with my dad or my siblings. If my dad and I go grab a coffee in the morning that we share, he's like, we just need a simple joy for today. And I'm like, you're right, we do.
Aw,
So I
yes.
totally
Ooh,
agree
I'm
with
gonna
that.
adopt
I
that. I
love
like
it.
that.
And it doesn't, like I said, it doesn't have to be a big thing.
It
Sometimes it
doesn't.
is just we run through the Starbucks line before the chaos of the rest of the day. And that's our simple
Mhm,
joy. Or it does look
mhm.
like for the first 15 minutes of my son's nap time, I'm reading. And then after that, I
Yes.
start my to-do list, you know?
Okay, yes, that's brilliant. I used to do that too. That was so when my kids were little, I had a photography business and that I worked from home. So I would put them down for quiet time or nap time, or however old people were. And I would always set my timer for 15
Hmm.
minutes to do whatever it was that I wanted to do, read a magazine, drink my kombucha, whatever it was, and then start my work. And that was huge for me in
Hmm.
those days. I'm so glad you said that, because I think if more moms did stuff like that, just that, it's amazing how much that 15 minutes can make a huge difference. And there's actually even there's brain science. Caroline Leaf talks about setting a timer. I think she says 17 minutes. I don't know
Yeah.
what that number means, but setting a timer for 17 minutes to do nothing and really just let your brain let go and kind of like allow your thoughts to kind of go wherever they're going to go and not really worry about doing anything. That can be a really good brain reset
Mm.
too. So I think it's kind of the same thing, like for like the mom reset, setting a timer for 15 minutes to do something for yourself. And I think for moms, especially, it's so easy for us to believe the lie that doing anything for ourselves is fickle or selfish or, what have you. And especially in the pursuit of joy, so often you notice that people think that the pursuit of joy is frivolous
Mm.
and that it's not mature or worthy in some way or another, but actually the pursuit of joy it should really be non-negotiable, because if you are not if you are not walking in joy, then how can you be your fullest self to offer what you have to the world, to your family, to the people that are around you? And no one is served better by you being miserable.
Yeah.
But I think that we sometimes think that we are. It's like we're being more serious or, whatever. And so I do try in wherever I go to bring the vulnerability of joy with me. And it is interesting to see how different types of people react to that.
Hmm.
Um, some people will kind of make fun or be like, and other people accept it, and other people will be like, I wish I could be like you. And I'm like, you can't. You just do it. Or especially with the clothes, like, I wish I could pull that off. And I'm like, girl, if you put it on, you're pulling it off.
Yeah.
Like, you just do it. Well, people would make fun of me. So
Yeah.
they probably wouldn't. Like, we're just so worried that people would. But like, so many people think that they can't pull, this is a pink jumpsuit. They like, I couldn't pull that off. Why not? Why not? Unless it's a bad color for you,
Yeah.
you could, like, find out what colors are good for you, wear those colors, like,
Yeah. No, I totally agree. I'm definitely a jumpsuit and overalls girl. Like my mom didn't. I laugh now, but she was not on board for me wearing a jumpsuit to my rehearsal dinner, much less Crocs
Oh,
down
no.
the aisle. But I totally agree. um, but I think that's a beautiful segue into finding joy in motherhood and the discipline, because I think
Mhm.
we've nailed that down. Like, joy is a discipline and you have to be intentional about it
Mhm.
because life just happens.
Mhm.
So how
Yeah.
can we, maybe it is the 15 minutes, but how do we
Mhm.
create pockets of joy in the little season of motherhood, but also like
Mhm.
in the in-between and as your kids get bigger? Like,
Yeah. Yeah. So I think, we hear a lot about, shifting our focus in motherhood and like remembering these days are going to go by so fast and like all this. And that's true. Um, and I think enjoy motherhood does require constant realignment of our focus and and perspective.
mhm,
Maybe not focus, but perspective, right? Like this season is so short and it is so beautiful. But at the same time, I actually think that it is so what I'm finding right now in the stage that I'm in is that so I now have a job where 4 nights a week I'm not here at dinner time, I'm not here at bedtime. And the thing about that is that I have been making people dinner and putting them to bed for 16 years. Okay.
right.
I don't miss
Yeah.
it. That's the truth. I love being at work. At those are the hardest times of the day. So our youngest, my daughter is 6, almost 7, and she is what Mary Van Geffen that I follow on Instagram calls a spicy one. Um, and you know, she is the most difficult one to put to bed, and and we're 16 years in. You know what I'm saying? So I don't feel guilty about not being sad that I'm missing that 4 days a week. I'm here 3 nights a week. It's fine. Um, but I love the break. And I said recently on my Instagram, if you are a stay-at-home mom and you truly are doing all the cooking, all the cleaning, all the management, all the childcare, all of the emotional training, everything, that is the hardest job in the world. You are working and you are working harder than most people. And the hardest, different jobs are different, but like the most stressful day at my job is so much less stressful than the average full day just being a mom. So, like,
Yeah.
if you are doing all that and you don't have an escape, like, and by escape, I mean like a job or, like somewhere where you can leave or, for me, like for 2 years, I didn't even have a car. Um, you know, just please give yourself grace because what you're doing is extremely difficult. It will pass, um, but it is so hard, and I think it's important to validate that. So yes, shifting focus, shifting perspective on what a gift motherhood is so important, and I think a lot of people are talking about that. But also seeing yourself as a person, aside from just being a mom, is also really important. And remembering to give yourself grace and remembering to validate your experiences and your feelings and the difficulty of whatever journey you're on is also really important because, um, toxic positivity in motherhood is not benefiting anyone. So if you're like having a really hard day and someone's like, don't let it steal your joy.
Like, okay, well, you come help me clean up the poop that my son just
Yeah,
shat on the
like
floor. Like,
on the floor. Yes, the carpet.
yes.
Yeah, exactly. Like, so I think it is really important to know how to ground yourself because if someone else comes in and says, okay, but what 3 things are you thankful for? You're going to want to smack them over
Right.
the head. But, that isn't a really good practice, right? So if you can figure out ways to ground yourself when you are on the train that leads straight into the pit of despair, then you can bring yourself back and you can say, okay, I hope I never have to clean up poop from
Yeah.
the crib and the wall and the carpet at the same time again.
Yeah.
But I'm so grateful that my child is healthy. And I'm so grateful that they're so creative. And I'm so grateful
Yeah.
that now I can go to bed or, whatever it
Right.
is. Um, that that really is important. But I think it's most important to be able to get yourself there rather than and so that goes both ways. Like we don't want to when someone comes to us with a hard day, we don't want to be like, well, at least your kids are, like
Right.
I had a miscarriage a long time ago. And, some people said things to me like, well, at least you have your other kids, or at least, you can have kids.
Mm,
And you're like, not,
mm.
that's not helpful right now. That's,
Yeah, one of my friends shared that recently, and I mentioned it on another episode, but she said the most damaging consolation is anything after the words at least. Like, no,
at least
after anything after at least blank is not helpful.
for sure. Like, can we start teaching that in schools? Let's just not start sentences with at least,
Right.
unless you're talking about yourself
Mm,
and it's because you've processed something. Because even talking about yourself, you don't want to be fake. You don't want to be,
yeah,
engaging in toxic positivity.
yeah.
So,
And I'm so glad you touched on that in motherhood because I do see this like pendulum swing in the just like mommy Instagram world of like, this
mhm.
is my whole life and we love this and we're so glad that we're here. And I'm like, yes, practicing gratitude is a great discipline. Like the Lord commands us to like practice gratitude because it reflects him. But at the same time, it took my son an hour to go to bed and my husband is not here and I am exhausted. Like the two can coexist. So I'm just like super thankful that you said like
Yes.
we have to make space for the mom also and
Yes.
be intentional about I'm going to get my coffee today because I know the rest of the day is going
Yes.
to be hard. And another thing one of my mom friends sent me early on was because I had just this year is the first year that I haven't been working. So that's just been a
Mm,
weird transition for me coming from vocational
mm,
ministry.
mm.
And so I was wrestling with the worth in motherhood,
Mhm,
being a
mhm,
full-time
mhm.
mom. And she was
Totally.
like, if you would pay someone else to come watch your child for the hours that you watch your child, it's a full-time job. And ever since
And
then,
the cooking and the cleaning and the yes.
yep, I've been like, yep, I work full-time. I raise a human
You work
being to not,
more than full
yeah,
time.
to hopefully not be a terrible human.
Yes, because when you think about right, if you were no longer available to do this stuff, how much money would it cost to hire all of those things done? It would be so much money.
For sure.
Moms are worth so much money. In fact, when I interviewed for my job, they were like, "Oh, you've been homeschooling 4 kids for 10 years? Oh, perfect. You have exactly the skills we were looking for." And I was
Yeah,
like,
you're right.
yes, you're right. I
Yes,
do."
totally.
Okay. I wanted to touch on when you're talking about getting your coffee.
Hmm.
Um, so yes, because we were talking about, the little treats, and I meant to say, no, it's not just making sure that you have the little treat or the coffee. I don't drink coffee, but yes, drinking the coffee, it's about savoring it as
Mm,
well.
yeah.
And which is hard when you've got people tugging on you and like peeing on the floor and
Yep.
spilling things and breaking glass and all that stuff. But if possible, and that's where that 15 minutes can come in, right?
Hmm.
Um, the savoring of it rather than just like choking it back because you need the caffeine, right? The savoring of that as a ritual or just as an enjoyable thing, I think makes it exponentially more effective as far as joy is concerned. And as far as like just feeding yourself, feeding your soul
Hmm.
is concerned, and sometimes yeah, as moms, it can be hard to remember to do that.
Oh, for sure. Which
Yeah.
I'm curious to, and I know that you've shared a little bit about your own story and what your family is walking through right now. But if you want, you can share that. But more so, how do we navigate fighting for joy in the seasons that feel joyless? And we all
Yeah.
have them, and they look
We all have
different
them.
every time. So, what
Yeah.
does it look like to fight for joy?
Yeah. So what is going on with us right now is that we, after many, many years of living with family, we bought a house. And then the seller, I was just making this so brief, was so, so, so difficult to work with. And then she broke the terms of her lease back contract and she leased back the house for over 30 days. She was supposed to let us have access to the house that entire time. She was supposed to give us a key. She refused to do either of those things. On and on and on. It was
Hmm.
so difficult. Well, then we finally got possession of the house and we found, she was just not, she was supposed to, under the terms of her contract, be maintaining the pool. She
Right.
had let that go. The pool looked like a pond. So anyway, we were spending money that we weren't anticipating spending. Well, then we just noticed some things that looked concerning. So we did an initial ERMI mold test, and we just got results back and found out the house has a lot of mold, and it
Yeah.
is not, recommended to be occupied. So this is fresh. Like, this is just 2 days ago at the time we're recording this that we found this out. So I think for sure I'm still processing this. But so it is September 8th today, and we put this house under contract in May.
Mm.
So this has been a very long, like most of this year has been occupied with this house journey, and it has not been pleasant.
Right.
Um, so that's what's going on with me at the moment. So I think since I've been practicing all of the joy things for so long, um, it's the training comes out, right?
Mm.
Like, you're a military spouse, right? Like they say in those really intense moments, the training comes out and you don't have to think anymore. So, I mean, not that I don't have to think anymore about joy. I
Right.
certainly do, but I have a lot of the disciplines in place. And but even still, I have to catch myself and be like, okay, like recently, I haven't been walking as much.
Mm.
And I'm like, I need to get out and walk. It makes such a difference. There's so much research about the benefits of walking. And for some reason, I'll get into really good flows with walking, and then I'll kind of stop and just be like, I don't want to. Um, but yeah, I think when it's easier to learn how to maintain your joy if you're doing the little practices when things are not hard. But that's not to say that you can't be dropped into the middle of an absolute hurricane and learn right then and there. That's what happened to me probably 12 years ago, the year that I had the miscarriage. So many things went horribly awry in that year, aside from just having a miscarriage. And obviously the miscarriage was the main, the most horrible of those things. But I was like, oh my gosh, here I am. Like, I've always been a happy person and I am depressed. And, um, obviously you have to be very careful with depression. I believe in getting help. I don't believe in, like, I think we're a whole body, right? So
Mhm.
mind, spirit, body, we have to attend to the body. We have to attend to the spirit. We have to attend to the mind. Um, but I had to learn right in the thick of it, how to pause and have gratitude, because I wasn't well practiced in that. I didn't realize it, but I wasn't. So I had to learn how to find gratitude. And sometimes it has to be something completely outside of the circumstances. I hate it when people are like, you need to be grateful for every little thing that happens to you. Like, I just don't, I don't like that. But you know what? I can go outside and look up at the pond where the fountain is going, and it's making that rainbow in the fountain spray, and I can be like, wow, that's beautiful. I can look at, you know um flowers blooming and think, man, that's amazing. Or like, usually when I leave work, it's dark outside because I usually leave around 10 o'clock. But every now and then we'll get done at like 7:30, and I'll walk outside and be like, it's daylight. It's beautiful. It
Mhm.
smells good. Like, and noticing all, the campus that I work on is very beautiful. Um, Noticing all the things in the daylight, just I think noticing can be a really grounding practice. Noticing anything around you, but also noticing beauty around you can be huge when you're walking through something horrible. Um, and then turning the noticing into gratitude can be a real game changer when you're in the midst of something that you cannot change. Also, um, I've recently been waking up with some anxiety. Sometimes I wake up in the morning and my heart's racing and I'm like thinking about all the mold things,
Mhm.
right? Um, the other morning I laid in bed and I just felt God speaking to me. What if you could just sit with this uncomfortable feeling of not knowing how much it's going to cost, not knowing where the money is going to come from, not knowing how long it's going to take, and just sit and be with that, which for my personality is very difficult. I don't like to sit with uncomfortable feelings for very long, but I did. So this is like right when I woke up. So kind of still not fully awake. But I just laid there and felt uncomfortable and was like, okay.
Okay.
And then then it was like, okay, now could you move into choosing to feel safe because I'm God and you don't know what's going to happen. I'm
Mhm.
not sitting here telling you what's going to happen, but can you just choose a feeling of safety even if that's not like what's being presented to you? And so I did, and I was able to calm, my nervous system down. Okay, I will say I am not prone to anxiety, and this is not a struggle that I deal with on a regular basis. So people that really struggle with anxiety, I don't want anyone to feel like
Mhm.
I'm suggesting it's just that
Right.
easy, because it's not. And a struggle with anxiety is very real, and I don't want to downplay that. But just as an example from my own life of, God speaking to me, because God's going to speak to you differently than He's going to speak to me, right? Um, but yes, I'm intrigued by the concept of choosing the feeling that you're gonna allow, and I'm not perfect at it, but in that moment, choosing to feel safety made a big difference. Now, have I woken up with anxiety since then?
Yes. Yeah.
Um, but again, it's a practice, right? You move through things and work through things in it, and it's hard. But I think joy is possible, and it looks different in different seasons. I actually had someone earlier this year, um, someone close to me, this was very painful, suggested I was being a hypocrite for talking about joy
Mm.
because I didn't have any joy. And I was like, what are you talking about? Just because I'm not like walking around, bouncing
Yeah.
off the walls, smiling, singing, and dancing all the time does not mean that I am not walking in all of the things that I preach. I am. It's just that the things I'm going through are heavy,
Mhm.
and it's okay. That's okay. It's okay to feel a little heavy when what you're walking through is
Yeah.
heavy. So, um, yeah, that was painful. I was like, oh gosh,
Yeah.
nope.
No, I'm so grateful that you shared that because I'm an Enneagram 4, so I fall into the
Mhm.
pit of despair and live there personality type.
Uh-huh.
Um,
Uh-huh.
which is why I think this
Mhm.
conversation is all the more impactful. Um, but
Yes.
you brought up a good point of we talked about toxic positivity, but I also don't think we talk about toxic toxic positivity in the church because I think the count it all
Mhm. Ooh,
let's
don't get
do
me
it. The count it all
started.
joy, brothers and sisters, I think comes
Yes.
from what you had shared,
Mhm.
the appearance of what joy is supposed to look like versus what does joy look
Yeah.
like rooted in the Lord. So, how has your faith played a role in undoing that belief system or that narrative about counting it all joy looks like this and life is just really heavy sometimes? So, how do you
Yeah.
wrestle with that tension?
Life is really heavy sometimes. So um well, how you know how does my faith not play a role in this conversation, right? It is the conversation. Um, and I think, as we unlearn things that we were taught that in the church that we realize were not, not the nature and heart of God, that can in and of itself be something that really steals your joy when you start realizing how you've been wronged or were
Mm,
taught wrong and it affected your life in a negative way. That it can be really hard. I really admire. I'm reading this book called She Deserves Better by Sheila Ray Gregoire and Rebecca Lindenbach, and there's a third author and I forgot, Joanna. They also wrote a fantastic book called The Great Sex Rescue, which was
mm,
amazing. And they are people who are Christians who are calling out the church for its toxic teachings, especially against women. So in The Great Sex Rescue, they talked about evidence-based research showing the differences between sexual satisfaction in Christian marriages versus non-Christian marriages. And anyway, it was a phenomenal book. But they wrote this
yeah.
new book called She Deserves Better. And they actually are where I haven't finished the book yet, but they're where I'm at right now. They're talking about this teaching that we all kind of got growing up in the church that was joy, Joy, Jesus, others, you, and talking
Mm,
about how when girls are taught this, taught to put themselves last, um, that this can set them up for so much heartache and for tolerating so much abuse. But obviously, the heart, of course, is, focus on Jesus, don't be selfish. But
Right.
we just have to be careful that we aren't setting someone up to um, toxic forgiveness of just continuing to tolerate inappropriate behavior from a friend or the church or a spouse or whatever. When you have a relationship where someone is continuing to make choices that are impacting you negatively, and the church is like, well, just forgive, and you're like, well, okay, I can forgive, but I actually I can't be continue to be this person's victim. And I think the church, bless them, you know, they a lot of times don't understand that. And yeah, I could really I could really talk for a long time about this and how it has affected me personally. I personally have been gaslighted and manipulated and not believed when I have shared my own story. Um, Things that I've never shared publicly and I'm not going to share now.
Yeah.
But yes, because of that, I have definitely become an advocate of boundaries. When the first time someone told me that I was allowed to have boundaries was when I was a teenager, and she was like, "You are not responsible for anyone else's attitude, actions, or feelings," and I was like, "I think you're wrong.
Whoa. Yeah.
That's not what I was taught, like explicitly. Like, you are responsible for my feelings," and
Yeah.
so it took me like 10 years to even believe that I was allowed to have boundaries. And so now boundaries are something that I do talk about a lot with Joy, and especially coming up, like, here before too long on Instagram, I'll start talking about the seasonal joy checklist. And the first thing on the seasonal joy checklist is what boundaries do I need to put in place to protect the joy of my family and myself through this season?
Yeah.
Because every single year I have people telling me about how their, mother or mother-in-law or father-in-law or whoever is pressuring them to do all of these things. And they're like, I'm dying and nobody cares. And I'm
Mm.
like, yep, I know. Like, you
Yeah.
just are going to have to ruffle some feathers. But I promise you're going to be glad that you did, because here's my story of when I just went along with everybody. And then I ended up in seasonal depression in
Mm.
February because I just was going along to get along and didn't think that I had the right to say no.
Yeah.
Um, so I think boundaries become a really, really important discussion when you're discussing joy. And of course, we don't want to shut people out. We don't, there are toxic boundaries as well. But I do think, generally speaking, within the church, um, and within women in the church, we are not given enough permission to have boundaries to protect our own joy, because it's Jesus, others, and then you.
Mm. Yes, I didn't hear that growing up, but it was a similar narrative that I had to unpack with a friend actually yesterday
Yeah.
because I had just finished John Eldridge's Wild at Heart.
Hmm.
Um, and he just talked about this men need men and men need accountability. But more importantly than that, I think he was just talking about how I think the church does that incorrectly. And he was just talking about these accountability groups. And I remember I texted a friend. I was like, that was me. Like, we were in accountability groups
Hmm.
where we shared our sins. But I don't think once we were pointed back to, hey, have you had that conversation with the Lord? It was,
Mm,
let me almost stand as a guard in your
yeah.
life for your
Hmm.
college years so that you don't screw up,
Yeah.
because then that looks bad. And we don't want the students that you're leading to see you as unholy. So that's a
Yeah.
whole side note. But
Yeah.
I think you made a great point in just sharing, like, ultimately the church is flawed, but
Yeah.
having boundaries is pivotal
Yeah.
because Jesus had boundaries, and that ultimately reflects the Lord's heart and the desire for joy that he wants for us too.
Yeah. I think something that I'm noticing a lot lately is that we have to be careful that we don't get, like, it's easy to get so focused on what the Bible says, like, consider others as more important than yourself, whatever.
Right.
And then kind of miss the forest for the trees and miss, like, okay, but like, let's look at the life of Jesus. Here's all these instances where he had boundaries. And, so we need to make sure that we're marrying those two things and not so focused on just the words on the page that we're missing, like, okay, but what was the nature of Jesus? Like, what's the nature of God? Like, is God really up here saying that a woman needs to stay in an abusive marriage so that
Mm-hmm.
so that she doesn't ruin her
Yeah.
witness? It's just, yeah.
No, I appreciate this conversation so much, and I would just love to I would love to connect our community with you. So where can we find you on Instagram?
Yes.
Where can we find the Joy Checklist? All of those things.
Okay, so my Instagram is at Beth Dreyer, and Dreyer is spelled Dreyer, 2 E's, like the ice cream. Not related. And in the Joy Checklist is in the link in my bio. When you click that link, it's the very first one. So you can find that there.
Awesome.
So you can download that. And then here, like I said, here before too long, I will add a link to the seasonal Joy Checklist, and I'll probably start talking about that on Instagram. But I do have highlights of both of those from years past where I've gone through questions. I think last year I started talking about one of the checklists and I never actually finished. So one of them, it'll like get to a certain point and then it's just done. But I have lots of content in my highlights on my Instagram. So I would
Awesome.
love to connect with people there. Yeah.
I will link all of those. And so for our closing question, it's what we finish with all of our guests. So if you could provide any wisdom to your younger self or for our community that is listening, what would you share?
I like I think it's Dr. Spock. Yeah. Where the opening line of the book is, trust yourself, you know more than you think.
Yes.
I wish that someone had said that to me, because what they were saying to me was, don't trust yourself, trust me.
Yes.
And as I've gotten older, the more I've looked back, the more I've realized the times that I didn't trust myself, I regret.
Yeah, for sure. Well, thank you so much, Beth. This was an amazing conversation, and I know that it's going to bless so many women. So thank you for joining us today.
Yes, thank you so much for having me. I'm honored.
Of course, and we'll catch you guys soon in the next episode. Thank you for listening, friend. I hope you enjoyed the episode. If you don't want to miss any wisdom or encouragement, be sure to subscribe to the show. And don't forget to rate and review. Your feedback means so much and helps our community grow. If you're looking for more wellness wisdom and free resources, head over to livingwiselywell.com or get connected with me on Instagram at wiselywell. And if you're looking for a break from the hurried health lifestyle, check out my Return to Rest resource for tangible ways to slow down and finally find rest.